Welcome back. So in this video, we're going to begin talking about applying criteria to our select queries. Criteria are basically logic that you use to filter out the rows in the output of your query. So right now, the only filtering we've been applying is this top 1000 or top 100 or top 10 piece, which is really just random filtering. It's not applying any criteria, any logic or intelligence to how the rows that are returned get returned. It's just grabbing 100 or 1000 or what have you off the top of the table. So what we're going to try to do now is actually select certain rows from the table based on criteria that we apply to the data, to the columns in the table. And this becomes increasingly important when the size of the data sets you're working with, the size of the tables you're working with grows. If your tables are only maybe 100 rows, 200 rows long, it may not seem that important, but in the real world, tables are often millions and millions of rows. And that's just more data than any person, any individual can work with meaningfully or extract any meaningful information from. So a big part of our job as analysts, once again, is to be the translators and the transformers. You're going to transform that data by only pulling out a certain subset of records that are of real interest to someone and then presenting that to them so that they can actually make a decision based on it. So without further ado, let's get started into the mechanics of selecting based on criteria. So in the previous video, we talked about how broadly you have these three categories of data that you'll be dealing with: numeric data, text data, and dates. And I said that dates are kind of their own thing and require some specialized techniques to deal with. And we didn't get into that when it came to selecting values, custom values in our SQL. Likewise, in this video, we're just going to talk about selecting data based on numeric criteria and text criteria. We'll get into the dates soon enough. So right here, I've gone ahead and selected the top 1000 rows, or actually just the top 290, because there's only 290 rows, in the human resources .employee table that we've been working with often. But what if I wanted to only pull all the records from this table where, say, the job title of the employee was design engineer? Well, here's where the third main clause, as it's called, of the select query comes in. And that is where. So you select columns from a table where one or more criteria are true. So in this case, we're going to apply a criteria to the job title field. So we'll just copy that and drop it down here. And we only want records where the job title equals Research and Development Manager. Now you notice that I'm wrapping this value in single quotes because, we are dealing with a text string. If it was a numeric value, I wouldn't need the single quotes. And you also saw how instead of having to type out Research and Development Manager, I was able to just click in the query output here and copy that value directly into my editor window. So let's go ahead and execute this query and see what happens. And there we are, only 2 records. So if somebody in the business that you work with, one of your customers says, hey, I don't want to see all 290 of those records, I just want to see the 2 that pertain to Research and Development Managers, well, this is how you do it. So now I want to get back to seeing all the records again, so I can look to maybe apply a different criteria, this time maybe a numeric one. But first I kind of want to keep this where line around just for reference. So how would I go about keeping code from being executed, but still keeping it visible so that I can see what I had written? Well, that is what's called a comment. So if you type 2 dashes before a line of code, it is removed from execution. So when you run the query in this editor window, that particular line of code will not be executed, but you can still see it. And if you want to include it in the code that's executed, you just get rid of the 2 dashes and it goes away. Likewise, if you want to remove multiple lines from the query that will be executed, you can either just type 2 dashes in front of each line, or you can use a multi-line comment. by typing a / and an asterisk to begin the multi-line comment, and then bookend that with an asterisk and another / Oops. And now those lines will no longer be considered in the query. So as you can see, login ID, organization node, organization level, job title, no longer included in our query. So let's comment that where statement out, and we'll get rid of these comments so we can see these columns again. Rerun our query so we can see all the records again. So now we'll try to apply a numeric criteria. So what if I only want to see records where the employee is a salaried employee? So here's this salaried flag column in our data, and it appears to have either a 1 value indicating salaried or a 0 indicating not salaried. So if I want to see only employees who are salaried, I would just say select all these columns where salaried flag equals 1. Let's run that. And there we go. 52 are salaried. And then if I change that to a 0, 238 are not salaried. So you may be wondering, what happens if I want to combine criteria across multiple columns? You can do that, and sometimes the logic in where statements can get really long and complicated, but we'll get into that in the videos to come. For now, just know that this is the basic structure of a SQL query. You select columns from a table where some criteria pertaining to one or more fields in your data is true. So that's it for this one. In the next video, we'll cover using inequalities in your where, which is kind of the inverse of what we did here. It's basically where you're selecting from your data based on values in your data not being equal to some other value. And we'll also touch on nulls, which are a kind of a database specific topic that you may not have come across if you've only dealt with spreadsheets before, that can cause problems when you're dealing with inequalities. But it's not as bad as it sounds. I'll see you in the next video.